Start.
Okay.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm trying to imagine this is the class, right?
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. So we are group 1. We are going to talk about acoustic cryptanalysis. And in this team, we are a team of 5 students, student A, B, C, and D. And we want to walk you through what acoustic cryptanalysis is. And basically, in this part, we want to look at our computer systems. And sometimes when we use our computer systems, we normally hear them produce some sort of noise in there, some sort of sounds when you try to change different operations or different applications which are running there. To some of us, that noise does not make any sense, but to some people, that noise makes sense. And when we look at our introduction slide, we see that computers emit a high-pitched noise during operation. Most of us have experienced that. These acoustic emanations can convey information about the software running on the computer, and sometimes it can leak sensitive information about security-related computations. This implies that when that sound changes, maybe there are different changes in terms of the application which is running. So the acoustic emanations, if we go to the last paragraph, typically are caused by voltage regulation circuits and are correlated with the system activity. Hence, the CPU change in power basically will affect the noise being produced. So in this experiment, the authors used 4 types of scenarios in trying to capture these sounds, and we're going to go through them one by one. And the first phase, basically you can see we have a pencil, and then we have 3 types of microphones here. So there's the bigger one, and then there's the smaller one, and then there's the smallest one. So they basically use this to try and get that noise from the computer. Then they take that to try and see if they can make sense out of it. So the first one on the left-hand side is a lab grade setup. Then we have the portable setup where A, we have a computer, and A, we have a laptop. Then B, C, D, and E, we have our portable setup, which we can carry to each and any place when we need to get these sounds which are relevant for us in case we are the ones who are trying to crack something. And we go ahead, we also have the mobile phone setup, so we can get this acoustic noise based even using a mobile phone. Just place it close to your computer and we are able to pull what we need. And quite sophisticated was the distance acquisition one, where we have them. Somebody help me pronounce this word. Parabolic microphone? Yeah, so we have the parabolic microphone, which can collect this noise. And then B, we have the distance attack, which we also use to collect whatever we need. And in the experimental, in the acoustic attack scenarios, so I'll explain more on this. We have an acoustic attack app. We have eavesdropping via compromised mobile devices. So we have self-eavesdropping, eavesdropping bags, targeted bags, eavesdropping and mass. Somebody help me pronounce the last word.
Faraday cages and air gaps.
Yeah, so in class, I will go through them in depth. Now I'm just trying to list them. In slide 3, we are trying to see that in slide 6, after collecting all these news, observing the acoustic leakage, we can see that in the first one, we have HLT. If you look at the right-hand side, we have HLT, MUL, FMU, ADD. All these are type of, basically, we are trying to look at which type of computers emit more noise and the frequency of that noise. If you look at HLTT, the first one in red, you can see that it is really bright. if you look at the last HLTT, you can see it is easier for us to see a pattern in there. Some of the computing systems are not so consistent. They tend to come and become faint, but through that, we tend to get the acoustic leakage based on the CPU operations which are going on, and we collect this news. Basically, how we collect it is through using our experimental setup, which we looked at up here, distant acquisition, mobile phone setup, portable setup, lab grade setup. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to the next person in this group, whom I believe is Saddam. Saddam, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So how do I just press?
Yeah, it is to give you the controls.
Okay, let's try it now. See if you can do it.
Okay. I guess.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
working.
So my name is wait. What happened?
Just keep on pressing here again. Damn, I spent 7 minutes. Wow.
Okay, so can somebody record for me, please? All right. So my name is Mevo, but you guys know me as Saddam. And basically, I will present how the attacks was experimented and what software they basically use to do it. So I'm going to talk about GNUPG, which is GNU Privacy Guard. From a previous experiment, they saw that it was possible to obtain information about the code executed by the target machine. So the target machine is the machine that is actually running the software that is encrypting or decrypting the code. So they saw that it was possible to obtain information about the code while the software was encrypting or decrypting the code. The useful information about the secret key used by the target machine can be obtained from the acoustic information. As my friend Denish explained earlier, the acoustic information is the sound that the machine makes whenever it's encrypting or decrypting the code. So they basically use an app or a software called GNUPG Privacy Guard. So it is a standard and commonly used RSA implementation. It is a popular open source implementation of the Open PGP standard available on all major operating systems. So the Open PGP is basically like whenever we take Kali, we are able to encrypt or decrypt because Kali have everything. So Open PGP is basically the same thing, but it's like a software that you can use to encrypt or decrypt code. So I will go to the next slide. So how do we distinguish the RSA keys? The experiment was done on two identical RSA signing operations in sequence using the same 4096-bit key and message. Each signing operation is preceded by a short delay where the CPU is in sleep state. It means that, so basically, to actually encrypt, they're actually using the signing operations, and they use a 4096-bit key and a message to do that. So the CPU sleep state is basically where you are not doing anything on the CPU. So the CPU is actually sleeping for an amount of time. So the way to distinguish between keys is the sound the target computer make when signing in GNUPG with that secret key. As I said earlier, the acoustic information is the sound that the machine make whenever the person is encrypting on the GNUPG. In the signing, there is a transition which corresponds to a detail in the RSA implementation evaluating S equal MD mode N, where N equal P and Q. So what is happening is that whenever we are signing a message, we are actually doing or evaluating, I would say, S equal MD, S which is the signature, and then M is the message, and then N, P and Q as the private key that that each person has. So they are not supposed to share those keys, as we learned earlier with the professor. So P and Q are the private key that we are trying to encrypt, and then with the help of the acoustic information, we can hear the encryption and then get the bits from P and Q. So the LC signing is completely combining MD mode P-1. I will not read everything. As you can see, there is the formula right here. So the first half of the signing operation corresponds to the explanation module P, and the second to the explanation module Q. I will show an image to explain what is happening here. If this will go on the next slide. Okay, so like they said earlier, there is two signing going on, P and Q. So P is the first half, and then Q is the second half. Whenever you have where you see the yellow arrows, you can see the first on top, you can see P, and then you see two horizontal lines. That's where the CPU is in sleep state. That's where you're not doing anything, or the encryption is paused for an amount of time, and then you resume now with the encryption of Q, where you can see the second arrow below. And they did those experiments on several computers like the Mevo N200 and then the Lenovo ThinkPad. You can see they get the same results for them, where you can see P separated with Q. So now we learn what is going on the software, but how do you distinguish the keys whenever you hear a sound? So far, see, the acoustic signature of a modular integer of explanation depends on the modulus involved. The key cause a different sounds in the process. So whenever the encryption of Q is going on, it's going to make a different sound than the encryption or the encryption of P whenever P is going on. So each RSA signature has a unique spectral signature. So you can see here that they're trying to actually disseminate the 5 different sounds that you hear whenever you encrypt different keys. So you can see the top one is with a different P separated with the horizontal line, where the CPU is in sleep state, and you can see each different encryption going on. So each of those encryption will have a different keys, a different sound, sorry. And then they did the same experiment on different laptop too, like the Mevo and then the Lenovo again. And then they have the same result. So how is the key extraction actually going on? So to recall that in RSA crypto system, the key generation procedure selects 2 random prime P, Q of prescribed size, public exponent E, and a secret exponent D, such that ED equal 1 more the, so you can see, I will try to look up how you say it. So the public key is PK. And then in RSA decryption of a software state, C start by computing CD mode N. So that this is still a reminder that RSA managed the key of 2048 bits, but here for the experiment, they actually use a larger size, like the 4096-bit RSA. So the attack is an adaptive chosen ciphertext attack, which exposes the secret factor Q 1 bit at a time from the most significant bit to the least significant bit. So whenever the encryption is going on, and then as soon as we hear a sound, we are trying to catch the first bit, which could be a 0 or a 1. So we go from the most significant bit to the least significant bit until we decrypt all the bits from P and Q. And then with P and Q, we can then go and then decrypt our cipher message. So they conduct a different operation like the ciphertext choice for modified GNP, and then the cipher choice for modified GNP. So to distinguish between the cases where Q or P equal to 0 or 1, they use the routine decrypt and analyze liquid, which they incorporated in the code that I'm not showing here, but you can always approach us to actually have a copy of the code. So the routine triggers an RSA decryption of the surface C with the unknown secret key P or Q on the target machine. It measures some side channel leakage during the decryption and applies some classifier to recognize the difference between the two possible leakage patterns created by the multiplication routine. So the routine should successfully recover Q after we repeat the experiment for an amount of time. So as soon as we get the first bit of Q or P, we run the same experiment again to get the second bit of Q or P, going from the most significant bit to the least significant bit. Okay, so I guess I will just press. Then now we pass out I will pass to my friends Arefin.
All right, so let's see if I can move it. Yeah. So I'm going to explain how the GNU-PG's multiplication routine works, because as Saddam said, getting the Q is like one of the key factors in this attack. So GNU-PG uses two different sort of multiplication. So the first one is basically the high school or the basic grade school multiplication routine, the way we have all learned how to multiply numbers. And the second one is basically a variant of a recursive Karasuba multiplication routine. So Karasuba multiplication is something like, so when you're trying to multiply two numbers and each number has a size of n, in that case, it's going to take around n square complexity. But when you're trying to use Karasuba, that actually reduces the complexity, and that's why they have implemented Karasuba, a variant of Karasuba here in the code. So the idea is like when you have a very large number and you want to multiply that, what it does is basically it follows a similar approach to Quicksort. It just divides the whole number into two parts, and then it simplifies the multiplication. So when you divide a large number into two parts, the first part is basically the larger part, and the second part is the smaller part. So the larger part is not, and the larger part is actually padded with zeros. So when you multiply and then add them, that actually comes with a lower complexity. So in the code, in the GNU-PG's code, I've not included the code here in the slide because it's going to get real big. So what they did is basically they use Karasuba to recursively simplify the multiplication, and when it gets to the base case, then and only then it implies the basic grade school multiplication to get the results. So the main target of the side channel of this attack is basically a side channel weakness of the basic multiplication routine. So the idea is like whatever the multiplication this GNU-PG is using, it will eventually go to a very basic multiplication, and that's where it's going to leak some information that we're going to see how it can be helpful to the attack. So now we're going to talk about attacking the most significant limb of Q. So the one that I've mentioned before, that it goes to a certain number and then it applies the basic multiplication routine. So here that is actually defined with the Karasuba threshold, which is said to be 16. So in the code, what Karasuba basically does, it creates a depth for recursive tree where each node has 3 children, and before using the basic multiplication code, and every child has 8 limbs. That means there's like around 256 bits located on every leaves of the tree. So when it multiplies, there's one observation. So if the Qi is equal to 1, then the second operand B of the multiply function mainly consists of limbs having all their bits set to 1. And if the Qi is 0, then the second operand of the multiplication consists of random looking limbs. So, and when the whole operation is done, the drastic change in the number of zero limbs in the second operand of the base case of the multiplication is detected by the side channel measurements on this attack. So here's a slide. So here's a little graph that I'm talking about. There's a visual representation. So they have shown 5 different keys here. They were all randomly generated, and they've like mentioned a certain portion of the analysis here. So at first, if there is a 1 that's been occurring in the multiplication, that's going to emit a different sort of noise, and it's going to show up in the spectrum. And if it's doing a 0, then it's going to show up differently in the spectrum. So here we have basically another representation of a different number of limbs, because like when we're trying to analyze the multiplication, the number that's been passed can be of different sizes. So it's crucial for the attacker to know that how much limbs are there in the ciphertext. So they've shown like two different images of the acoustic emission here. So if we have on the left, we have the image for a 63 limb ciphertext, and on the right we have a 57 limb of ciphertext, and it can be distinguished. So it can be distinguished visually. So and when we are talking about multiple different sizes of limbs in the ciphertext, that can be picked up by the classifier that they will be using in their experiment. So next we have 2 different examples. The first one on the left is showing the number of zero limbs in the second operand of the base case of the multiplication. So the line that you can see, the brightest line that you can see here is basically the number of zero limbs occurrences on the second operand. And it tends to change frequency as the recursive call goes up, and also it may be different in some operations, but they tend to have a certain pattern. And on the right, you can see the number of zero limbs in the second operand base case, but here they have included multiple different limb sizes. So each line here represents a different limb size. So we have 64 limbs to 50, we have 55 limbs to 64 limbs mentioned here in their paper. So the next one is basically going to be explained by Mashfiq Rizvee, and he's going to talk about further details of the GNU-PG RSA key extraction.
Okay. Thank you, Arefin, for your wonderful presentation. Hello, everyone. I'm Mohammed. Now we'll be talking about some further details regarding the RSA key extraction. So in this section of the paper, the authors systematically analyzed the acoustic leakage created by the attack and presented the complete attack on GNU-PG. The following things are going to be discussed. I'll discuss them one by one. So first comes extracting the most significant limb of Q. Now, if the attacker were to have 2 spectrum templates describing the leakage of 0 valued and 1 valued bits, he could classify an unknown signal by checking similarity between it and the templates he has. In this case, a template is a vector of real numbers describing the signal power at each frequency bin. The classification is based on computing the correlation of the Fourier spectrum of the leakage with 2 templates. This approach, however, possesses a problem since it requires the attacker to obtain examples of leakage spectra corresponding to both 0 valued and 1 valued bits. In real life, obtaining an example of a leakage spectrum of a 0 valued bit is trickier. However, this problem can be easily avoided if L is greater than Q and less than 2Q. The reduction of modulo Q is equivalent to computing L minus Q and will cause the bits of the result to be random looking. So it will be obtaining a spectrum similar to what of the sound of 0 valued bits of Q at the beginning of the attack. And the second one, adapting to changes in acoustic signature. So during the calibration stage, the attacker generates two ciphertexts corresponding to a leakage of 0 valued and 1 valued bits of Q, and it obtains multiple samples of the decryption. This allows the attacker to generate a template of the leakage caused by 0 valued bit and a template of the leakage caused by 1 valued bit. During the classification step, a spectrum of an obtained leakage is classified using templates as corresponding to 0 valued bit or to a 1 valued bit. This step might be repeated a few times until a certain classification is achieved. The template update step, new template for 0 valued bits and 1 valued bits are generated using the last few spectra, including the newly obtained ones. This is done by computing the median spectrum for 0 valued and 1 valued bits by taking the median power value in each frequency band across all available spectra for 0 valued and 1 valued bits. Now, overcoming the crossing point, the specific bit index where this crossing point occurs depends on the specific values of the ciphertext used. For extracting all the bits, a routine is assumed which distinguishes the cases qi from qi equal to 0 from qi equal to 1. The routine triggers an RSA decryption of the ciphertext C with the unknown secret key PQ on the target machine. Measures the acoustic side channel, which measures the acoustic side channel leakage during decryption and applies a template-based classifier to recognize the difference between the two possible leakage patterns created by null and multiplication base case. We also assume that this routine generates new templates for 0 valued and 1 valued bits upon switching from GI1 and GI0 and back. So signal classification is done in 7 stages, which include trace of modular exponential, computing the frequency spectrum, peak smoothing, normalization, computing distance, classification, and template update. Error detection and correction. If by mistake some bit qj equal to 0 is misclassified as 1, this means that the successive values of both gi1 and gi0 for all I less than j will be always larger than q. After reduction modulo q, C will always consist of 64 minus j by 32 random looking bits limbs. Note that this value of C will have the same side channel leakage as if qi equal to 0. Thus, the attack will always report subsequent bits of q as being 0 valued regardless of their actual value. This situation is again easily detected by the attacker, allowing him to backtrack and retry. The attacks were first implemented against GNU-PG version 1.4.13. However, during the course of the research, 2 newer versions of GNU-PG, which is version 1.4.14 and 1.4.15, were released. The main difference between newer versions and the older version of the algorithm is in the decision on when to perform the additional multiplication by the ciphertext. The attacks are also in some sense resilient to other code changes and require dedicated countermeasures in order to prevent them. Will be discussed by my teammate.
Okay, thank you, Mashfiq, for your nice presentation. I will be describe the comparison with timing attack, comparison to this research topic. So our approach is different from the Pony and Bromley timing attack, which is described in the earlier section of this paper. And GNU-PG always uses crossover multiplication, whereas the others multiplication includes the higher order differentiation and all the other stuff. Next point is timing information cannot be observed by nominal communication channel, which is very much appreciated for this for our topic. And our acoustic attack uses the measurements acquired throughout the decryption, which use excellent frequency resolution and robustness against noise. And last part is we used Windows API called Query Performance Counter to measure our timing attack comparison to GNOPG attack. And here is the figure when we observe a strong correlation between the inverse of the decryption time and some of the strong components in the leakage spectrum. In this figure, we are observing that the bits 0 takes much longer time than the bits 1, which is very good for our GNOPG computation. And the last topic is mitigation. This section includes the how we mitigate the attack. So proper acoustic shielding using acoustic absorbers and soundproof enclosures would attenuate the signals, thereby requiring the attacker to use more expensive equipment, more demanding microphone positioning, or longer attack time, which includes the attacker maybe need noisy environment, parallel software load, EM shielding, and ciphertext normalization, which includes the add last few bits to the ciphertext comparative to the comparative in decryption process. And here is two figure which includes the acoustic measurement frequency spectra of second modular exponentiation with and without constant load. The first figure shows how the attack computation with load, and the next figure includes the without constant load through the computation. So here is the conclusion part. So the acoustic leakage is indeed correlated with the code running on the target computer. Actually, this paper shows the acoustic leakage easily allows distinguishing between different RSA keys, which was covered by Arefin. Then it proceeds to present the approach for extracting RSA keys from GNOPG as well as report on the empirical performance on the attack. This paper also explains why this approach works by analyzing the relevant code of the GNOPG and give a more detailed report on empirical result, which I showed in my previous slide. Finally, they empirically compare the attacks to timing attacks. Any questions?
So how much time did we actually
Okay,
do?
thank you.
হ্যাঁ আরফিন ভাই দিচ্ছি আমি চ্যাটে